we have Tim Boson in the studio now to tell us about what's going on in, well, our little bit of Hertfordshire. Tricky time of year to be talking about things that touch on politics, though, Tim, I think, probably, given that we've got the elections coming up.
Good morning, Ian. Yes, we're in this sensitive period prior to the May elections. And, of course, it is a good opportunity to remind listeners they should vote for the county council representatives on May the 1st.
Yeah.
But we have to be careful not to be too political.
Absolutely, which we never are here on Mix 92.6. We're very balanced, and we're all about the community, actually. And so politics to us doesn't really come into it. Anyway, Tim, tell us what's going on in the wonderful world of controversy.
Well, lots of things happening, but I'm going to avoid some of them for obvious reasons. Perhaps we should start with talking about a big one, which is going to have an impact on not just St Albans, but the whole surrounding area, which is the expansion of Luton Airport.
Oh, yes, good idea.
And that has come as a bit of a surprise in that the planning application originally for the expansion, which was to go from 19 million, I think, to about 36 million, that planning application was initially refused. The inspectorate refused it. But the minister, Heidi Alexander, has given it the go-ahead.
Right.
So there'll be this massive expansion going up to about 2040, where they're going to double the numbers. The obvious concerns for residents
when they're going to double the numbers of what, though, Tim?
Of passengers.
Oh, okay.
That's the number of passengers. So the concerns will be, obviously, noise, pollution, sustainability, infrastructure. All of those things are going to have an impact.
Yeah.
Of course, it is a gradual process, and 2040 seems quite a long way off. But nevertheless, I think residents all around are a bit concerned. The positive side will be a big investment into Luton Airport, and they're talking perhaps as many as 11,000 new jobs.
That's amazing. Well, I can't believe that these kinds of initiatives get to the surface without people appreciating what needs to happen, as well as just building more runways or whatever it is. That you do have to think about roads and infrastructure and all of the supply services and so on that need to go on around that kind of development. So surely there are people that think about this stuff, aren't there? So
yes, and usually it's made part of a condition of planning applications that certain things should happen. But there have been one or two scandals in the paper recently. Some people may remember a whole new development that was made in Cambridgeshire where there were promises of schools, surgeries, etc. And 5 years later, nothing's happened.
Yeah. Oh, dear. OK, well, fingers crossed then, I guess, Tim, that the sensible people are going to be part of the whole thing. So what else is on your list?
Oh, well, there is a lot happening at the moment. As I say, I'm skirting around some of them. But perhaps we should talk about toilets.
Oh, definitely. Let's talk about toilets, absolutely.
Because they are an issue, and what is proposed now is a complete revamp of the city and district toilets.
We're talking about public toilets here, aren't we?
We're talking about public toilets, yes.
Yeah. This isn't going to affect people in their own homes.
No, that's a rather different issue. There's going to be an upgrade. 220,000 is going to be spent on upgrading, particularly toilets around the areas, the parish areas around the city. But it will mean the closure of the toilets at Clarence Park, Verulamium Park, Drovers Way, and of course the one in George Street's already gone.
Actually, the one at Verulamium Park has pretty much gone in the sense that you can't get to it because it's flooded.
This is true, which of course leads to a good piece of news, which is there now a temporary walkway in Verulamium Park allowing you to exit now into St Michael's. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't seen that.
Yes, that area got completely flooded and impassable.
Yes.
Now
is this the bit at the kind of public toilets end of the lake there, or are we talking about different bits?
No, it's completely the other end. As you get into the village of St Michael's.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course.
That entrance had to be closed because that area was completely flooded.
Yeah.
So now there's a walkway. So that's good news.
Yes. Yes, it's and I've also, I think, read somewhere that there's a plan to make the other end, the end that I thought you were talking about, into a kind of wetlands thing. Is that right?
Well, there was a big environmental plan to do a lot of work there. That's been trimmed back, but they will be looking at the banks and wilding those. And there's a smaller scheme that has had approval.
Right.
Whether the funding there is ready yet or not, I'm not sure.
Okay, so are we going to end up with net fewer toilets? I think that's maybe what we need to think about.
I think this is correct, yes. Yeah, but some of the, as I say, some of the parish ones, Wheat Hampstead, London Colney, Park Street, the Quadrant, they're going to be upgraded and improved.
And how do you improve them? Do you make them...
Well, if you have a look, say, for example, Sandridge was one that's recently been improved. It was really pretty basic.
Right.
And now that has been improved.
Okay.
So that's where the investment's going, into those toilets.
Okay. Well, no, it's important. I mean, when you've got to go, you've got to go. And, it's important to have those resources there. Right, Tim, well, let's take a quick break, have a listen to a bit of music, and then we'll come back and talk about more things that are slightly controversial here in Hertfordshire. Tim Boson in the studio with me, and we've been talking about controversy in doings around Hertfordshire. So we were talking just now about Luton Airport, developments there, public toilets. I think we were exploring the net figures on growth in public toilets, or how many are going to be actually renovated and made more comfortable for us all. So, Tim, what's next on your list of interesting things that are going on?
Well, a good piece of news, I think, for people who are concerned about the amount of subsidy that we give for planning applications is that the government have now decided to lift the cap. Perhaps I should explain it more carefully. If you're putting in a planning application, you had to pay a fee, but that fee was capped.
Right.
And what happened in the end was it ended up with council taxpayers subsidising developers for their planning applications. Right. And that's going to stop, which I think is a good thing.
Okay, that sounds like a good thing. So
that's
excellent.
Some good news.
Excellent. Okay, what else?
Well, we could talk a bit about the post office.
Oh, yes, let's do that.
Many of the listeners will know that there was concerns because it seemed that the post office was going to close several of its branches, including the one in St. Peter's Street in St. Albans.
Okay.
Now they're talking about actually franchising out. So I think this is probably the most likely solution. And what that means is the post office will franchise out to another company.
So can you explain a bit more about that? Because obviously we don't want to get into the whole Horizon thing, but some of us, including me, might have thought that all of those sub-post offices were already franchises of the post office. And so you're talking about something different.
With the sub-post office, you're absolutely right there. You're used to having the male and female postmaster running a village post office.
Yep.
And that was their responsibility. Of course, there was a huge scandal over that because the post office got its technology, software wrong and accused lots of postmasters and postmistresses of fraud when it was entirely wrong. Of course,
absolutely.
That was a national scandal.
Yep.
This is about Crown offices. Crown offices are slightly different. And so the post office here will franchise out in the way there are many well-known chains, for example, in terms of coffee shops, where it has a brand name, but actually it's another company running.
Okay. And do we think this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing, or we just don't know?
Probably the last. The good thing is, if it happens, and of course it's still all up in the air, we will still have a post office.
Few. I mean, for those of us that do actually want to send parcels and return things from well-known large delivery companies, then post offices are jolly handy.
Yes, and of course they offer so many other services as well.
Yeah.
So it is important for us to have a post office.
Absolutely.
Right in the centre of town.
Sure. Okay, so anything more on your list of important things to be aware of?
Well, there's an ongoing struggle happening with Verulam Estate in St Albans. I mean, this is quite a local thing, but when that estate was built, there were areas of land, open land, often on the corners of streets, which it was assumed were owned by the council. And a few years ago, it was discovered they weren't owned and they were auctioned off. And there's a continuing battle, if I can use that term, between the poor residents of Verulam Estate trying to save their little green spaces.
Absolutely. Gosh, well, Tim, this is all good controversial stuff, and of course, we can't really dive too deeply into some of the politically contentious topics for conversation because Mix 92.6 doesn't have any political interest at all, and so we need to steer well clear of that. But there is coming up an opportunity for people to find out a little bit more as we approach the council elections, isn't there? Well,
there's people will probably remember the government announced a big local government reorganisation, and it came in three parts really. A devolution part, which is interesting because the devolution was to an elected mayor within unitary authorities.
Yep.
And because, and I've mentioned this in previous interviews on this radio station, because we're a two-tier system, the government have marked us to become a unitary authority.
Yep.
That's the whole of Hertfordshire. And we have to decide, and I mentioned last time, how we're going to divide Hertfordshire up. Will it be into one unitary authority, or will it go from 2 or 3 or even 4? And by November, the decision will have to be made by Hertfordshire where we're going. Now, this local government reorganisation is quite complex, and Radio Mix, in cooperation with the Cathedral, are organising a question and answer session with a panel of experts to help people understand the processes, not so much the politics, but the processes of how it's going to work and what's going to happen. And that will take place on the 28th of April.
28th of April.
At 6:30 in the Cathedral.
Excellent.
And our very own Nick Hazel will be chairing that.
Good for him.
The expert panel's still under covers for the moment.
Okay.
But we'll have an expert panel there to deal with the questions about how this is going to work. And it is very dramatic in some senses because our city and district council will no longer exist. And if the government timetable is kept to, we'll have a new unitary authority in place, or unitary authorities in place, by 2026. So it's quite a tight timetable.
Absolutely. And free entry, obviously. Remind us again, Tim, when that's happening at the Cathedral.
So 28th of April, 6:30. Come and hear what's going to happen. And very important issues, for example, just to explain to listeners, for example, what's going to happen to Verulam Park.
Yep.
At the moment, City and District, when City and District no longer exist, who's going to run it, how's it going to work, and should we have our own city council in St Albans?
Absolutely. All very important issues. Well, Tim, thanks as always for coming in and sharing some views on that. That was Tim Boson telling us about what's going on in the world of contentious thinking here in Hertfordshire. We've got some more music coming up.